"You need to move out. My daughter, Tessa Holloway," said it loudly enough that the couple at the next table stopped mid-toast. Her voice cut through the music, sharper than the clinking silverware, sharper than anything I had been prepared for on her wedding night. I felt every eye around us shift, hover, then pretend not to stare. I kept my hands still in my lap. At 72, you learn that stillness is stronger than panic. "Really," I said, keeping my voice level. "I pay the rent, the bills, and the groceries." Tessa blinked at me, annoyed that I didn't crumble the way she expected. Her new husband, Clayton Reeves, looked down at his plate as though he hoped it would swallow him. A bridesmaid stiffened beside her, and a groomsman coughed into his napkin, but my daughter, she simply reached for her champagne, smiling toward the head table as if she hadn't just ended something that had taken me decades to build. "Mom? Not here," she muttered under her breath. But the damage was already done. People heard. People saw. And she didn't care enough to take the words back. "I'll talk to you later," she added. Her tone clipped. "Tonight is supposed to be perfect." Perfect. That word tasted bitter. I had spent the past year carrying her life so it would not collapse. I had moved out of my own small place, taken over her payments, steadied her world when she was losing control of it. And now, in the middle of her celebration in downtown Charleston, she was sweeping me out of the picture like I was an inconvenience. Tessa lifted her glass toward a photographer passing by, posing with the kind of smile that never reached her eyes. The camera flashed. My daughter was captured forever, looking radiant. While I sat across from her feeling the crack of something deep and final, she didn't look at me again. I folded the napkin in my lap, pressing it between my fingers to keep them from shaking. If only she knew what would happen next. After the lights dimmed and the music faded after the last guest left, and the truth finally settled heavy in the air, I sat there quietly, already knowing that nothing about our lives would be the same when morning came. Before everything unraveled, I had been living quietly in a rented townhouse in Wagner Terrace. It was small, warm, and mine. I filled my days with simple routines, tending to my herbs on the windowsill and reading in the evenings. No one needed anything from me there. No demands, no crisis, just the steady comfort of being 72 and finally breathing on my own. Then Tessa called one afternoon, her voice trembling before she even said hello. "Mom, I got laid off," she whispered. "They said the company is downsizing." I heard the panic under each broken sentence. She told me her bills were stacking up, that her savings were almost gone, that she was behind on her rent in West Ashley. She tried to sound responsible, but I could hear the fear swallowing her. "Come stay with me for a bit," she said, "just until I get back on my feet." The next day, a notice from her landlord showed up in her inbox. She forwarded it to me with a message that read, "I don't know what to do. Please." I packed my things that night. When I handed in my early lease termination form at the office, the manager frowned. "You sure about this, Marina? You seemed happy here." "I have to help my daughter," I replied. It was the only answer that made sense in my mind. Moving into Tessa's house felt strange from the start. She greeted me with a hug, clinging to me the way she had as a child after a nightmare. "I'm so relieved you're here," she said. "I promise this is temporary, just until I'm steady again." Within the first week, her landlord asked us to update the lease. Tessa nudged the papers toward me. "They need someone with stable income," she muttered. "It's just paperwork, Mom. Nothing big." I signed without hesitation. Later, I learned she never told Clayton that the stability of their home depended on me, not her. He believed she had everything under control. She let him believe that. I kept unpacking slowly, folding my old life into her closets, shelf by shelf, not realizing how much I was giving up in the process. The shift started quietly, almost softly, like a door drifting closed without anyone noticing. At first, I paid the rent because Tessa promised she would reimburse me once she found steady work. Then it became the electric bill, then the groceries. By the end of the second month, she was handing me lists instead of thanks. One evening, I was sorting through the envelopes on the counter when she walked in with her phone in hand. "You're always home," she said casually. "You don't mind covering the internet upgrade, right? Clayton and I need the higher speed for work." I looked at her, trying to understand when my presence had turned into convenience. "An upgrade. We already have the plan I paid for last month." She waved her hand. "This one's better. And you use the internet too. It only makes sense." There was no argument in her voice. No request, just assumption. I nodded, even though something inside me pinched. A week later, I found myself staring at a reminder card from my doctor. Follow-up appointment scheduled for next Thursday. I placed it in the drawer instead of my purse. I had already covered an overdue electric bill and 2 grocery trips that month. Something had to give. It always ended up being me. The real sting came on a Saturday afternoon. Tessa had a few friends over women she used to work with. I was passing down the hallway when I heard my name. "My mom likes paying," Tessa said lightly, as if she were discussing the weather. "It keeps her busy. Otherwise, she doesn't know what to do with herself." Laughter followed, soft but sharp. I froze, my hand still resting against the wall. I did not recognize the woman she was describing. I did not recognize the daughter speaking, either. Later that night, Clayton stopped by the kitchen while I was washing a pan. "Everything okay?" he asked quietly. I met his eyes for a moment. "Just tired." He nodded, but didn't press. He walked away as if tension were a room he had no business entering, and slowly, day by day, the house closed around me in ways I hadn't expected. The day Tessa announced her engagement, she held out her hand like a trophy. "Clayton proposed," she said, breathless with excitement. "We're getting married this fall." I hugged her, and for a brief moment I let myself believe things between us might soften. But within a week, the tone inside the house shifted. Every conversation circled back to the wedding, and every plan she made seemed to erase me 1 inch at a time. One evening, she stood in the kitchen scrolling through her phone. "Clayton's parents want us to have more privacy," she said carefully. "His mother asked why you're always around." "I live here," I reminded her. Tessa sighed as if that were a technicality. "They're traditional. Mom, they think newlyweds should have their own space." The next morning, I overheard her in a tense call with the landlord. Her voice was low but urgent. "Yes, after the wedding," she said. "I just need to know the process for removing someone from the lease." "No, she doesn't need to know yet. I'll handle it." The words struck like cold water down my spine. I stood frozen in the hallway until she hung up, then stepped back into the kitchen before she could see me. That afternoon, she breezed in with a garment bag draped over her arm. "We went dress shopping," she said, glowing. "It was perfect. The girls helped me pick the one." "You went today?" I asked. "I thought we were going together." "Oh, it just happened last minute," she said lightly, already walking away. The exclusions continued. Vendor meetings she forgot to mention. Cake tastings she attended with friends instead of me. When bridesmaids visited the house, I heard one whisper, "Why is her mom even living with her? That's so odd." Tessa didn't correct them. She laughed. One night, she sat beside Clayton on the couch, their heads together as they scrolled through honeymoon options. "We need our own life," she murmured. "Mom will understand." I watched quietly from the doorway, realizing she had already begun writing a future that didn't include me at all. When I arrived at the venue, the coordinator glanced at my name, then gestured toward a table pushed near the edge of the reception hall. "You're seated over there, Mrs. Holloway." It was far from the family tables, far from the head table, far from everything that should have included me. I sat alone while guests drifted around me in clusters of laughter and photographs. No one approached. No one waved. I folded my hands and waited. Tessa swept into the room in her gown, radiant and busy, surrounded by bridesmaids. She didn't look my way. I watched her glide from group to group. Her voice bright, her smile polished. When she passed near my table, her tone shifted. One bridesmaid asked quietly, "Is your mom doing okay?" Tessa's voice dropped. "But not enough. She's fine. She depends on me financially, so she gets emotional. Ignore it." The words landed with a sting sharper than anything I had braced myself for. I was the one paying her rent, her bills, her groceries. I sat perfectly still, as if movement might make the lie heavier. Dinner was served. Plates clinked. Conversations rose and fell. I took a few slow bites, trying to stay invisible. Then Tessa approached me with a smile so thin it looked painted on. "Mom, we need to talk," she said. I set my fork down. "All right." She didn't sit. She didn't lower her voice. "You need to move out, tomorrow." A few heads turned. A bridesmaid's jaw dropped. Someone muttered, "Oh my God," under their breath. My chest tightened, but my voice stayed steady. "Really, I pay the rent, the bills, and the groceries." Tessa's expression didn't change. "Clayton and I need our space. We're married now." Clayton stood behind her, hands clasped, eyes fixed on the floor. He did not speak. He did not look at me. The room around us blurred for a moment, sound thinning to a dull hum. I felt the humiliation settle into my skin, heavy and cold, like a second dress I hadn't chosen to wear. Tessa gave a short nod, as if the conversation were finished, then turned away to pose for a photograph with her new husband. I stayed in my chair, hands folded, knowing something inside me had just broken cleanly enough that it would not be repaired again. I returned to the house after the wedding with my shoes still in my hand. The silence inside felt heavier than the noise I had left behind. Tessa and Clayton were still at the reception, smiling for photos as if nothing had happened. I walked to my room and closed the door without turning on the light. I opened my closet and pulled out the small suitcase I had owned for years. I placed it on the bed and began folding only what mattered: 2 pairs of pants, a few shirts, my toiletries, my medications, my documents, and the framed photograph of Tessa at age 7, holding a seashell on Folly Beach. I hesitated with that one, then slipped it inside the side pocket. Everything else stayed behind. I packed as quietly as I had lived in that house. Before dawn, I walked through the hallway one last time, no note, no explanations, no goodbye. Tessa had given me her version of closure at her wedding banquet. I would give her mine now, the kind that didn't make a sound. At first light, I stepped outside with my suitcase and locked the door behind me. The street was still empty, the air cool. I called a rideshare and kept my voice steady when the driver asked if I was traveling far, just across town. But before I left West Ashley behind, I stopped at the leasing office. The building manager, a man named Victor, looked surprised to see me so early. "I need to remove myself from the lease," I said, "effective today, and end the autopay tied to my account." He blinked. "Are you sure I am?" He printed the papers. I signed my name with a hand that didn't shake. By mid-morning, I checked into a small inn near James Island, a modest place with a narrow front desk and soft hallway lighting. The woman at the counter handed me a key. Room number 12. I walked inside, set my suitcase down, and finally let my lungs fill with a kind of air I hadn't felt in a long time. No one asked where I was. No one asked when I was coming back. The calls began the morning after I settled into the inn. My phone vibrated endlessly, one name after another lighting up the screen. I finally answered when my cousin Eleanor called for the second time. "How could you ruin the wedding?" she demanded before I could say hello. "Tessa said you screamed at her in front of everyone. She said you threw your napkin and stormed out like a child." I held the phone against my ear, steadying my breath. That didn't happen. Eleanor, she said you embarrassed her. Clayton's parents were horrified. Eleanor's voice cracked with judgment she didn't bother to hide. I stayed silent. Explaining myself felt like trying to patch a boat with paper. By late afternoon, another call vibrated through, this time from Clayton's mother. She didn't wait for pleasantries. I always knew you were dramatic, Morena. But at your own daughter's wedding, truly shameful. I let her speak until she ran out of breath. When I didn't argue, she hung up. Frustrated I hadn't played my assigned role in the script Tessa had written for me, the lies spread fast. According to Tessa's version, I had ruined her marriage celebration, insulted her friends, and left her in tears. In her story, she was the victim of a mother who couldn't let go. That night, my phone rang again. Aunt Ruth's name appeared on the screen. I answered immediately. She was the one person who had ever truly known me. Her voice was soft. Morena, I've heard some things, and I don't believe a word of it. What happened? For the first time since leaving, my shoulders lowered a fraction. She told everyone I made a scene. I said, you were at the ceremony. You saw me. I saw you sitting quietly at that table alone. Ruth replied, that's why I'm calling. Something's not adding up. I close my eyes. I don't think explaining myself privately is going to change anything. She's already shaped the story she wants them to believe. Ruth exhaled slowly on the other end. Then you decide how you want the truth to come out. Sweetheart, but don't let them bury you. I sat at the small desk in my room at the inn, the lamp casting a narrow pool of light across the blank email draft. My hands hovered over the keyboard for a long moment. This wasn't anger. It wasn't revenge. It was clarity. Quiet. Overdue clarity. I began typing. I listed every month I had paid Tessa's rent in full words. I listed the electric bills, the internet upgrades, the groceries. I noted the date I moved in, the day I was added to the lease, and the morning I removed myself from it. I wrote the exact words my daughter said at her wedding banquet. You need to move out. I explained, plainly, that I left quietly, without raising my voice, without causing a scene. No embellishment, no bitterness, just facts. When I finished, I read it twice. Then added the names of every relative in my contact list, along with Clayton and both of his parents. It became a full family email chain, impossible to ignore or quietly delete. Before I could talk myself out of it, I pressed send. The replies came faster than I expected. My cousin Sarah wrote first, I had no idea. I'm so sorry. Then my niece Tessa told a different story. This makes more sense. A few minutes later, a message from Clayton's father arrived. Short and stunned. We were misinformed. Please accept our apology. I stared at the screen as the truth began doing what explanations never could, forcing people to see what they had willingly ignored. My phone rang. It was Clayton's mother. I answered, and her voice shook with something colder than anger. Why didn't Tessa tell us any of this? She demanded. She said you lived off her. She said you were unstable. I told the truth. I said quietly, nothing more. She drew in a sharp breath. I need to speak with my son. Hours passed. The sun lowered. Then another message appeared, this one from a number I didn't recognize at first. It was Tessa. Her text was only 3 words. Why did you? I set the phone down and folded my hands, letting the silence settle around me like a choice I should have made long ago. Tessa arrived at the inn 2 days after I sent the email. I heard the knock before I saw her through the peephole, arms crossed, jaw tight, eyes already blaming me for whatever storm she had walked through to get here. I opened the door just enough to stand in the frame. She pushed past me into the room. Fix what you did, she snapped. I am losing face with everyone. Clayton's parents are furious. My friends keep asking questions. You made me look like a liar. I closed the door quietly and faced her. I told the truth. You humiliated me, she shot back. Couldn't you have come to me, talked to me privately? You told me to leave. I said, I honored your wish. Her mouth parted. Stunned that I wasn't softening, that was different. That was heat of the moment. It was your wedding banquet, I replied. You were very clear. She threw her hands up. I was stressed. You know how hard planning was. Clayton kept pressuring me, and his mother kept questioning everything. I had to show them I could handle my own life, so you handled it by erasing me, I said. Her eyes watered instantly, not from heartbreak, but from strategy. She sat on the edge of the bed, face buried in her hands. You're supposed to protect me, not destroy me. I am your daughter. I remained standing. And I am your mother, a mother you lied about, used, and discarded. She lifted her head. Then take the email back, send a new one. Say you exaggerated or misunderstood. Please. Mom, just make it go away. I will not rewrite the truth, I said, for the first time. She had no rehearsed response. She stared at me, searching for the version of me she used to bend. That woman was gone. Tessa stood abruptly. If my marriage falls apart, it will be on you. She walked out without waiting for an answer. Later that evening, my phone buzzed with a number I did not recognize. The message was short. It is Clayton. I saw the email. I did not know you paid everything. I am sorry. I set the phone down, letting the weight of his words settle in the quiet room. The news reached me 2 days after Tessa and Clayton returned from their honeymoon in Asheville. I was sitting at the small table in my new apartment when my phone rang. It was Victor, the building manager from their old place. Morena, he said, lowering his voice. They showed up this morning with their bags. The keys don't work because the locks have been changed. You removed yourself from the lease, so the contract collapsed. Legally, they cannot stay there. I closed my eyes for a moment. And you followed the procedure. I did, he replied. They were not happy. Later that afternoon, I received a message from one of the bridesmaids who had witnessed the scene. They're staying with Clayton's parents. His mother looks like she swallowed a lemon. People are asking questions. Not long after, another message arrived from a wedding guest I barely knew. Tessa told everyone you lived off her. After the email, well, people talk. A lot. Word spread quickly across Charleston's tight social circles. The story unraveled thread by thread. Tessa lying about her finances, lying about the wedding blow-up, lying about who had carried her life for the past year. The shine she had tried so hard to polish began to dull. And even Clayton started asking questions she couldn't answer. One evening, Clayton called me. His voice was low, tired. I am trying to understand who I married, he said. I should have known earlier. This is something you and Tessa will have to work through, I told him. He didn't argue. By then, I had already moved into a modest but bright apartment overlooking Shem Creek. It was small, but it was mine. I could hear the boats in the distance at night, a gentle reminder that freedom sometimes sounds like water and wind. I wrote Tessa one final letter. No anger, no apology. You told me to leave. I took everything that belonged to me and left. I placed it in the mailbox without hesitation, then returned inside and settled by the window with a cup of tea warming my hands. The evening light spilled softly across the room, touching everything I had built for myself, everything that no longer required permission or explanation. If you felt the weight of this story, if you've lived even a piece of it, like this video, leave a comment and subscribe so you never miss the next one.